Welcome back, it's me, Lou. Okay, so today is going to be a very random video. Lately I've been reviewing a lot of McFarlane action figures, and as great as the McFarlane action figures are, it's just making me feel really, really nostalgic for some of the older figures from yesterday. And earlier today, I was just kind of thinking about like some of the older Batman figures that Mattel produced years ago. And I thought it'd be a fun video just to ramble and talk about some of these older Ben Affleck Batman figures. All right, so years ago, this figure came out, and I thought this was like the coolest thing in the world. This is the Ben Affleck Batman from the Batman vs Superman film. It was produced by Mattel back in 2015. So this figure is pretty much 7 years old, which kind of boggles my mind. Mattel, I think this was like towards the later years of when they had the DC license, because prior to this, like this packaging, they had the DC Classics and then the DC Universe. When they switched over to this style of package design, it became known as the DC Comics Multiverse. And nowadays McFarlane has the license and they have their own line. It's called DC Multiverse. But this was Mattel's take, on the DC characters. Because prior to this, the focus with the DC Classics and DC Universe was more so based off the comic book designs of the characters. When they jumped over to the multiverse stuff, they were covering not only the comic books, but also the movies and then the television shows, especially the television shows at the time, like with Arrow and The Flash. Those were really taking off on CW. So it only made sense that Mattel, just cover the broad range of all the different multiverses in the DC spectrum. So this Ben Affleck figure, for me, it was really cool. I dug the Batman vs Superman movie. It was kind of dark. It was a little bit different than what I expected. But I thought the costume designs are great. I love the new design of the Batmobile. And this costume, it just looked really, really cool. I loved Ben Affleck's take on Bruce Wayne and Batman. I loved Jeremy Irons as Alfred. I thought that was really cool. And this was just a cool toy line altogether. We got Superman out of it. The likeness to Henry Cavill is all right. We got Ben Affleck as Batman, Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, and then we got the armored Batman, the one that's very much inspired by Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns. And for those of you who remember this, like DC, they were really big on doing the Build-A-Figures, much like Toy Biz at the time when they did the Marvel Legends and, later Hasbro. But the cool thing with Mattel is that, for certain things, much like this movie, instead of doing a Build-A-Figure, they did, you got to build Batman's grapple blaster. So each figure came with a specific piece. And for me, the frustrating thing was I could never find all the figures I needed to actually build this. And it made me crazy. Prior to this, Mattel did the Christopher Nolan, Christian Bale Dark Knight movies. And then they also featured, instead of a Build-A-Figure, you got to, build, the bat signal. And again, much like this line, it was very, very frustrating because I could never find all the figures needed to assemble, the actual item. So I always kind of felt shortchanged because I really wanted the grapple blaster, but for whatever reason, I couldn't find all the figures to complete this. But it looks cool, and I hope that maybe one day I'll actually come across this. But for now, this is kind of like a pipe dream. Sometime later, they gave us the unmasked version. This was, I think this might have been a store exclusive, I think. I don't remember seeing this in the wild. I had to buy this from, a collectible toy store. And as much as I give, McFarlane grief over the likeness of, their actors for some of their action figures, like the John Cena Peacemaker looks like crap. And, the Jason Momoa Aquaman looks horrible. I don't think Mattel was any better, especially with his Ben Affleck. It looks nothing like Ben Affleck. It just looks kind of odd. But I think at the time, though, I didn't know any better. You know, I just thought it was kind of cool and kind of novel to get like an unmasked head with this kind of like cowl. It really reminded me of the old Kenner Dark Knight collection from the 90s. There was a Batman figure that vaguely looked like Michael Keaton, and then you could like put the hood over his head, and you know you got to dress up Batman. So this figure kind of reminded me of that. And I think they share the same mold. There's a difference in their color scheme too. This one's a little bit more metallic and a little bit more reflective, versus this figure, which is a little bit more on the gray side. And I think the belt buckles are colored differently also. As you can see, the belt buckle's a little bit more gold, and this one's not so much. And then again, this figure, you know, you got to buy all the pieces to build the grapple blaster. But what was odd though is that I don't think they necessarily told you which figure gave you what. So I think that was another frustrating thing. Oh no, I take it back. They did. The numbers were just kind of like faded out, and they're hard to see. But I think one of the frustrating things was that you wouldn't be able to build the grapple blaster with just one wave, because this was only figures and pieces 1 through 4, and then you needed 8 pieces. So I think for me the frustrating thing was that it was multiple waves. So I think there was at least 2 waves you had to get to complete the gun. But you know, like I said, some of the figures I think were short packaged. You know, there weren't as many of one figure as another, so it was just, you know, a hard time just trying to complete the set. But this is a great figure though, and I have it loose right here. It's not up to date in terms of like its engineering. You know, this can't hold a candle next to any of them like McFarlane stuff, but for back then, it was decent. It kind of fell in line with like the Marvel Legends figures. This guy's about 6.5 inches tall, and it was decent. And you know, it's not the greatest thing, but I think for the price point, it was very fair. You know, his head rotates, his arms move, and it's, as you can see, it's very simple engineered. You know, they don't have the double pinned elbows. There's no ball socket, no butterfly joint. You know, he does have an ab crunch, you know, swivel at the waist. And the way they articulated the legs back then was a lot different too. It's like it was like overthought. You know, they put too much thought into this, you know, and it, for whatever reason, it seems like the hip joint's always been a weird thing. Like if you remember some of the older like Marvel Legends from Toy Biz from like the late 90s, they always had that weird, it was like literally a ball joint. And then if you wanted to kick your figure's if you wanted to kick your figure's leg up, you had to like twist it around just to get it in the right position. And then Mattel, they came up with this, which was kind of weird. You know, the minute you kick outwards, you get this really unsightly cut underneath the thigh. So it's just, I don't know, it's just kind of weird. It's kind of messy. But this was, you know, action figure engineering like 7 years ago. And this is what was considered like a premium action figure back then too. I mean, it's not at the same level as like a Diamond Select, but for like a mass retail outlet action figure, you know, this was considered premium. And it's nice. You know, it doesn't, I don't think it's aged all that well, but at the same time, you know, I think for me, just being nostalgic and having a lot of sentimentality towards this line of action figures, you know, I think these are still pretty neat. And they also had these. These were, I reviewed this previously. This is the budget line from the Batman vs Superman films. These are clearly aimed more so at children than they are collectors, but I did like the package design a lot more. You know, even though these came in these nice boxes, and you know, since it's a box, you can actually take out the figure and preserve the packaging. These, the minute you take the figure out, you ruin the card. But I did like the graphic appeal of the card because I thought the design was awesome. You know, it's a lot brighter, a lot more vibrant. It's a lot more eye-catching. And for me, it really sells the figure more so than just generic red box. You know, you got this cool image of Superman and Batman. You got the cool logo. And I think the presentation's just overall better. It's just weird that, you know, with the budget figure, it just really screams at you. It's like, buy me. You know, then when you look at these, it's kind of like, it's just like in a box. And I remember, like, before Toys R Us closed down, you know, those last few years, whenever you go down the action figure aisle, I always remember just seeing, like, you know, that wall of just, like, the red boxes for the DC figures. And I'd always comb through them and just find the same figures over and over again because all the hot figures were always taken really fast. But the nice thing with these, you know, budget figures is that, you know, collectors, they don't always have these figures in mind. So it was a lot easier, like, completing a set of the budget figures versus these. And these are a lot more affordable, too. And if you're not, you know, if you're not about articulation and if you just want a cool, like, desk toy or display piece, you know, the budget figures are not bad. You know, they're super affordable. The sculpting and detailing, they're nice, they're decent. You know, the articulation is really limited. They're not going to do all the same things as a premium figure, but, you know, they're cool. I dig them a lot. And here's a size comparison. You know, they're different in height. And then some years later, we got the Justice League budget Batman. This is Batman in his tactical armor. And there is a McFarlane figure of this guy for the new Justice League movie, and I passed up on it multiple times, but now I find I have to actually, like, get it now since I have, like, I think I have, like, 75 excuse me, I'm, like, losing my voice. I have, like, 75% of the Justice League figures from the movie, and I kind of need this guy now. But it's a pretty decent Batman. You know, it's a little bit different. He has the goggles over his face. Kind of looks like what's the dude's called? Owlman from Watchmen. I can't remember if it's Owlman or Night Owl. There's a lot of owl characters in comic books. But this figure is nice. It has a weird, like, felt cape, which if you're like me and you have dry hands, it, like, it sticks to it and it's annoying. Whereas this one kind of has, like, the Jawa vinyl cape. So yeah, I mean, they're all cool figures. You know, it's like I said, this is a very random video, but I was just kind of feeling very nostalgic for these older figures. You know, they're not the greatest now, but back then, these are really, you know, they're pretty hot back then. And I'm really hoping that McFarlane taps into, like, giving us this version of Batman. You know, I'd love to see what McFarlane could do with this guy. And for me, it's just wild to think that not too long ago, I thought this figure was, like, the bomb. But, you know, as time passes forward, so does, like, advancements in technology. And, you know, the action figures we get nowadays, they're just amazing. But yeah, this is kind of a short little history lesson. If you were old enough to remember these, you know, I'm sure this takes you back. If you were young enough and to have, like, played with these toys back when you were younger, you know, you probably have memories of these also. But if you're new to collecting, you know, this is what you kind of missed out on. You know, they're not the greatest figures in the world, but they do have a certain charm about them. And I kind of say this all the time. Like, if you're ever at, like, at a convention or at a flea market or at a collectible toy store, you know, don't sleep on these older figures. You know, they might not be the new hotness, and, you know, they might look a little bit outdated, but, you know, they're fun to play with. They have a nice charm to them. And, you know, they're just like a small piece of action figure history. All right, so with that being said, let's wrap this one up. Once again, my name is Lou. If you're new to my channel, welcome. If you're a returning viewer subscriber, thank you so much for your continued support. I greatly appreciate it. So until the next video, be safe, take care of yourself, buy lots of toys, and most importantly, be happy. And I'll see you at the next one. All right, later.